An entitled jerk steals things right off of my desk at my office, even though he was contracted to clean the office in the first place. But fortunately for me, I had cameras set up to catch him in the act, proving to everybody that this guy's a thief in the office, resulting in him eventually being fired. Here's what happened. So roughly 6 or 7 years ago, I worked as a lead IT engineer at a very large multinational company. It was a pretty good job that I thoroughly enjoyed, if I'm being completely honest. Although us IT guys had a secure room for storage and preparation of all the spare laptops and monitors, we worked out at an open plan area outside the secure room. As we worked in IT, we often had spare cables and mice, tool sets, and other such bits laying around on our desk area. Most of these were company owned, but a few items here and there were personal possessions, as is often the case in the office. One of the personal items I owned was a nice miniature screwdriver set. The tools supplied by the company were not the greatest. I mean, they gave us a basic and ordinary screwdriver set, so I brought in my own nice mini set that I'd been given as a present the year before. It makes my work easier, as it's far more precise and is better at removing the tiny screws you've got inside laptops. Most of the time, it's locked away in my desk drawer. Anyways, every now and then, a cable or a spare mouse would disappear. And honestly, this is no biggie. They're a company-owned kit, and it's probably someone just coming in early, finding they've forgotten their phone charging cable, popping down to the IT area to ask for a new one only to find nobody is there, and then just grabbing a spare that's laying around. Usually, we just order a few more spares here and there to cover it off, and I never worried too much about it. But then, one day my USB-powered cup warmer disappeared. Now, this annoyed me as I owned it. I couldn't just order a replacement from the company's suppliers, and it certainly had not been taken just to replace a faulty or lost peripheral. I asked around my colleagues, and a couple of them had also had personal items disappear here and there. Now, as someone who hates the injustice of theft, I decided to do something about it. I did a bit of research and found a piece of free software that can detect movement in the footage from a webcam and then record a short video of it. It can also record from multiple cameras simultaneously. I didn't want the usual green LED on an active webcam to give anything away, so I took a couple of old or used webcams that had been returned to the IT store. I disassembled them with my trusty screwdriver set and then stuck blue tack over the little active LED light before reassembling them. I set them up on top of my two monitors such that one was pointing downwards towards my desk and the second was pointing towards the entrance area of our cubicles. Now, I should explain that the desks were the usual square office desks with a curved chunk missing from one corner where you sat at. They were arranged with the walls and windows on one side, with 4 desks in an open square with cupboards in between them, such that your back faced the other 3 desks in the cube. Then finally, a single gap entrance between the desks facing into the corridor. My desk was towards the window, meaning that anyone wanting to reach my desk had to walk through the one gap just to get there. I configured the software not to record during the day when I was working, but only after hours it would record in 20-second blocks every time it detected movement. Now, for a couple of months, all goes relatively smoothly. I see one worker grab a spare mouse one morning in the footage, and honestly, that's about it. It really was no big deal. Then, one day, I got a job to replace a broken keyboard on a laptop. I go to dig out my little screwdriver set, but it's nowhere to be found. Eventually, I carry out the repair with my company-owned toolkit, but then I start looking through the recorded footage from my webcam setup. And then just like that, a few days ago, my little toolkit is sitting there on my desk. I must have forgotten to put it away in my office drawer, so I fast-forwarded to a video from the following morning, and it had disappeared. There's a few other files there from in between, and usually, the cameras just get triggered by a security guard passing by on his rounds of the building, or sometimes it's the cleaners emptying bins or something like that. But then I see it. The company hired a window cleaning firm to clean the insides of the windows, roughly once every other month. I see the guy cleaning windows and then moving on. 10 minutes later, he returns carrying a cloth, and I watch the footage as he gently drapes the cloth over my toolkit, then picks it back up, toolkit and all, before walking away from the scene of the crime. And that's when I knew I had him. I promptly sent the footage to the chief of the security team, who I know quite well. 5 minutes later, he's at my desk. He's not entirely thrilled about my unauthorized surveillance, which he did subsequently ask me to remove, but he is far more interested about what my little web cameras had captured. I'm asked not to share the footage with anyone else, and he reassures me that the matter is being investigated and that senior management are involved. Eventually, things go quiet for a little bit, but a few weeks later, he calls by my desk and presents me a brand new miniature screwdriver set. I pressed him for details, and he basically told me the whole story. The window cleaning firm that the company used for this office was a local family-owned firm. My company called the window cleaning firm and suspended the contract pending an investigation due to theft by one of their workers. The owner of the window cleaning firm promptly came around to investigate, and upon seeing my footage, he recognized the guy as a newer employee they had hired a few months prior. The suspension of the contract was a big deal for this little family-owned firm, as this was a large building with probably about 1,000 staff inside of it, and hence quite an important contract for them financially. The owner of the window cleaning firm agreed to promptly fire the thief and buy a replacement toolkit for me, and in return, my company agreed to lift the suspension and allow the window cleaning firm to resume their work. Now, to this day, I wonder if it was really worth it for the thief. I mean, they lost their job over a $20 screwdriver set. Of course, for my company, it was a much bigger deal. People like that could potentially steal important documentation or other private company information. Either way, allowing a thief on site was a huge no-no for them. So in short, don't steal, especially from IT guys who have the full view of a webcam at their disposal. Wow, that is seriously messed up that the window cleaning guy decided to steal from you. Like, first of all, this guy picked it up like he was trying to avoid fingerprints. Like, he wrapped it up in the cloth and then picked it up instead of picking it up with his hands. Like, does this guy have some kind of shady past or what? Like, what's going on? And personally, I seriously cannot stand people who steal. They are some of the most despicable people on planet Earth to me, and I just can't agree with taking someone else's property for your own gain. So good for you for trapping this guy and figuring out who was stealing all your stuff off your desk, because clearly this guy's been doing this for a while, and I'm willing to bet that all the stuff that's been missing from your office probably stem back to that guy stealing it in the first place. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for going off of my sister-in-law for not paying me back, as well as bragging about having my own place? Because right now she is calling me a jerk, and at this point I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So I have a sister-in-law who's 31 and a brother who's 28. I'm an 18-year-old female, and in 2022, they lost their home due to a wildfire. I was already helping them financially starting at the age of 16. When they lost their home, I let them borrow $400 alone at this point, and also started a GoFundMe and raised $5,000 for them to be able to get a place. Well, they decided to blow that money on vacations and fast food while living in a hotel with 3 children. I was at this point saving up for a car, and my brother tried to gaslight me in saying that if I cared for my niece and nephews, I would send them all of my car funds, which totaled to about $3,000. That way they could get a place for their kids. But I told them no. They got a camper and have been living there ever since. They both refused to work and bum off of their family, and after I turned 18, I refused to send them any more money, and that's when they really started to treat me even more like garbage. I decided to calculate how much they owed me, and it was about $600, but because earlier in 2023, I needed a new phone, they sent me a 2020 iPhone SE. I decided to subtract the price it was when it first came out, so they only owed me about $400. I told them they needed to pay me back, but they just argued with me, saying they only owed me about $120 and refused to pay me any money back. Ever since I've gone no contact with them, I have gotten my own apartment. My sister-in-law has sent a single dollar a day and would call me a whale each time. It got to the point where I decided to brag about how I'm 18 years old with my own place, and yet they're 28 and 31 without a place or a job. I work full-time as a daycare teacher, and my sister-in-law argued it's hard work with 3 kids, but I just know that there's people out there that would say otherwise. My sister-in-law called me a jerk for demanding her to pay me back, especially when she's homeless and jobless with 3 kids. So honestly, am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? No, I don't think you're the jerk for asking for that money back, especially since it really seems like they were using you in the first place. I do kind of think it was weird and petty to be like, yeah, I'm 18 and I've got my own place. What are you doing with your life? But I think considering the way they've been treating you, it seems like this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to conflict between you and these people. But for them to be like, yeah, give us all your money so we can take care of our kids, like, that's weird, and that is absolutely uncalled for. Like, you would have been a fool to give up that $3,000, and thankfully you saw them for exactly what they are. Like, you've already done so much for them, and yes, it is a tragedy that they lost their house in a fire, but the way they're living their life now is honestly unacceptable. So I don't really blame you for trying to put them in their place. I feel very wronged and bitter about my parents and the way they were celebrating my failure when I first went to college. But ever since I got my grades up, they've been cold and indifferent, not showing any enthusiasm enthusiasm about my academic success. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. When I decided to leave for college, my parents were unhappy with my decision. However, when I joined another college and found happiness in my new academic path, they began pressuring me to change my major. They belittled my chosen field and claimed it had no future prospects. What upset me the most was not their lack of faith in my choices, but rather their reaction when I struggled academically. During times when my grades were not satisfactory, my parents would express their disappointment by emphasizing the financial burden I was placing on them. They made me feel like a failure and constantly reminded me of how much money they were losing because of my college education. This added to my already mounting pressure and sense of inadequacy. Oddly enough, when I made the decision to change my major and subsequently achieved outstanding grades, my parents appeared cold and indifferent. They did not show any enthusiasm or support for my academic success. However, when I received poor grades, they would shame me and compare me to other people, making me feel even worse about myself. The situation reached its lowest point when I left college with a GPA of 1.04. Throughout this entire journey, my parents never seemed genuinely happy or proud of my accomplishments. Their inconsistent reactions and lack of encouragement have deeply affected me emotionally, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Yeah, your parents sound like really toxic people. It seems like they would rather see you fail than ever try to celebrate your success, and that's exactly what should have happened here. They should have celebrated you doing well instead of trying to celebrate your downfall. Like seriously, what's wrong with these people? If I had a kid in college and they were happy in the college major they were pursuing and they were finally getting good grades, I would celebrate that. I wouldn't be cold and indifferent. And by the way, the only reason they're acting that way is because you literally proved them wrong. So honestly, I'm so sorry they treated you that way, and hopefully you can move forward and be happy despite their terrible treatment. My mother-in-law is trying to convince my wife that our 10-year marriage has been a failure, and at this point, I'm considering cutting her out of our lives entirely, but I'm really not sure if that's the right call. Here's what happened. I've been with my wife for 14 years, and since the very beginning, her mother has repeatedly compared me to her oldest son, and not surprisingly, accused me of never being able to live up to the shining example of a man that he is. It started our marriage off on a bad foot. My wife was privy to her tendency to do this, and for a while went low contact with her mom until we had settled down a bit into our new life together. Along the way, my mother-in-law has had moments where she's gotten frustrated with where we are in life. Her only checklist for success for us is having children and buying a home. Well, it turns out infertility and working in New York City make both of those things very difficult. We've gone through several options, but we haven't been successful. It's taken an enormous emotional toll on us, especially coming from an ethno-religious community where infertility is a scarlet letter. We're also not interested in owning a home at this stage, but I guess context just evades her. Recently, my wife went to see her mom, and they eventually got into an argument where my mother-in-law was trying to convince my wife that our 10 years of marriage have been an utter failure with nothing to show for it, namely no kids and no house, comparing us again to her eldest son who has 3 kids and a home. Also, as a side note, he cheated on and divorced his wife, although she never mentions that detail when comparing me. Now, when this happened, my wife was shaken, and for the past 2 weeks has been noticeably depressed. She's normally a bubbly and joyous person, so honestly, I'm at my wit's end. From the beginning, she has constantly cast our marriage in the shadow of other people and has provided no understanding of our situation. I'm close to demanding that we cut ties with her entirely, but I'm honestly not sure if that's the right call. Wow, your mother-in-law sounds like an awful human being. The fact that she's trying to compare you to her oldest son, who cheated and divorced his wife, by the way, in my opinion is so ironic. It's like she's keeping out so many details that, I don't know, might be really important to the story, but also context really does matter. You've hit the nail on the head. Like she doesn't care at all about your situation or the fact that you two are trying your best. Like you're both having trouble having kids and you both live in New York City. So I'm sure your housing situation is already really tiny as it is. And now, as a result of a visit that you thought would go well, your wife, who is usually bubbly and joyous, is completely depressed. Like that is not fair for her or for anybody involved. So in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I would not feel any remorse about cutting this mother-in-law off entirely. She literally is trying to come after your marriage at this point. Like, I don't know about you, but she's either bored with life or she really is trying to ruin your life. And in my opinion, I don't think you or your wife deserves that in the slightest. An entitled Karen and her husband want me to control the behavior of customers, all because they didn't get what they want. And I'm honestly blown away by their entitlement. Here's what happened. So I work at a large storage facility facility, and we provide carts for customers to move their goods as a courtesy and keep them evenly distributed between the two entrances to the building, and they're available on a first-come, first-served basis. As I was doing my daily facility inspection, I got a call from my coworker in the office asking me to come speak to a customer because they had an angry confrontation with another customer. My immediate reaction was, so what? Mediating disputes between customers is not in my job description. Regardless, I took the elevator down to the back entrance where the argument occurred, and I talked to the customer back there. She explained they were using all of the carts to transfer goods between their new unit and their old unit, and when another customer had asked for one they currently had goods on, she let them know that there were more carts in the front of the facility. Well, this triggered the person asking enough to start screaming the phrase, "Why should I have to?" which is featured prominently in the story. The screaming lady's husband got aggressive, so the cart-using customer's husband asserted himself without violence, and the other guy decided to go to the office and make it our problem. I get to the office and I ask the Karens what happened, and immediately I recognize the husband as someone that has thrown a tantrum over there not being a cart available for him immediately when he arrived just a few months ago. They share their side of the story, which also features the words, "Well, why should I have to?" as well as the same events, but casting my other customer and her husband as dangerous, crazy people. The male Karen repeatedly states that he will do whatever he has to protect his wife, but I let him know if anyone does violence on the property, they will be evicted and reported to the police. He keeps saying that it's my responsibility as the facility manager to control my customers, and that if something happened to them, I would be the one at fault. But I disagreed with him strenuously, stating that I can't control anyone and I am not responsible for the behavior of the customers. They ended up leaving in a huff, saying that I'm not a real manager. But as they were leaving, I let them know that there are more carts in the front if they still needed one. Yeah, people like this are so confusing. They want you to not only take their side, but also believe the garbage they're spewing out. Seriously, just get a cart from the front. Don't try to take someone else's just because you're too lazy to get one. And for them to frame these people as crazy psychopaths, or even imply that they're gonna get violent, all under the guise of, oh man, I gotta protect my wife. That, in my opinion, should have been the last straw to get these people evicted, because they've already been a problem in the past. And honestly, if I ran that facility, I would definitely be kicking them out. Am I the jerk for wanting to end a family tradition that excludes one child? Because right now, I'm really worried about my daughter, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So every April, my wife's family holds a family reunion. They don't celebrate holidays together often, so they go all out for these by renting out a hall and getting catering, and literally putting on the works. The only weird event at these reunions is a clothing swap between women of the family. For whatever reason, when my wife and her sisters all had daughters close in age, they decided a long time ago that this was the best way to do family hand-me-downs. All of the women in my wife's family ended up being very short, so they all wear similar sizes. So it's always kind of worked out, with a 70-30 gender split, and the only men in the family being myself, my brother-in-law, and my sons from a previous relationship. This swap meet is the main event. They make it a whole show about it. It's incredibly boring from the outside, so my boys and I always head out early if we go out at all. Now, this would be a non-issue if it weren't for my daughter. For the sake of the story, we'll call her Katie. Katie is not her real name. Katie is my wife and I's baby, and she ended up taking after my side of the family. We are a taller family, or at least just not super short. So by the time she was 11 years old, she started coming back with nothing from those parties. The first time, I assumed that she was just being picky until I realized that she was starting to be bigger than her older sisters and cousins, and had outgrown any size that they would wear. My wife thought she needed to realize that not everything was for everyone, and to just have fun being there. Last year, she started having body image issues, thinking that she was fat and needed to go on a diet, and now I'm thinking having this event is feeding into it. This year is going to be a massive deal as my mother-in-law is going into a nursing home, and she is downsizing. She was so into fashion that she has an entire storage unit full, so this is going to be a ton of stuff. I'm starting to think the reunion shouldn't have a clothing swap at all, and all of that should be done privately at another time. I mean, family shouldn't be about a fashion show. My wife thinks that's ridiculous, and our daughter is just having typical teenage problems that will go away on their own. But if she's so bothered, she can just not go or stay with the boys. But I don't think that's right. This is mainly a girls' reunion, and it's not like there's anything else for an alternative for her to share in, because they don't really get rid of accessories or anything else. It's all just clothing. This event is starting to get mean and exclusionary, and it needs to end. I'm trying my best to make them see sense, but I'm honestly getting nothing but arguments. So honestly, am I really in the wrong here? Because I seriously am not sure what to do. Honestly, I don't think you're the jerk at all. Like, why would your daughter go to this event, especially if she's so much taller than everybody else? Like, it doesn't make any sense in the slightest, and making her go really seems counterintuitive. Like, it just doesn't compute as to why she would show up in the first place. She's much taller than the other side of her family, so maybe instead of forcing her to go to this event and keep up this stupid tradition that is clearly going to exclude her, just take her out shopping that day or something like that. That way she can have some kind of clothing coming out of this event, because obviously nothing's going to fit her because she's taller than everybody else. So no, you are definitely not the jerk, and the fact that nobody else is understanding that, in my opinion, is really unfortunate. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.